5 to 12,000 South 1063. 1,05623. Contact Archer. Find the flight you like to travel more for. 227-4, yeah, 301 field.
Hi, I'm Bill Sanders, and this is WatchArtSci. Today we're in New York City at the Bremont store, and we're going to talk about aviation watches. Well, hi again. I'm out of the cold. And I want to talk just a little about Bremont watches before we get started. The first thing that ever came to my mind knowing about Bremont were the cases. The cases were incredible. They tested them with everything from high-flying U-2s to the South Pole Trek to all kinds of different things that they have. And these are real tests. And the cases themselves are a combination of 3 layers of steel, titanium, and more steel, and they have been proven to be excellent cases, and they're made by Bremont. The 3, what you might call the 3 pillars of Bremont watches are British technology, aviation in the military, and adventure. So, in looking at some of the watches that we saw there, where they're like the kinds of watches that a lot of people have for, like, they have Omegas that for the man on the moon, and they have Rolexes for explorers and submariners. And it's similar but different genre. For example, a Kingsman, they made 3 different Kingsmen for the 3 different agents in the film Kingsman. And if you see the film, look for the watches. I'm going to look at it again just to see the watches. I enjoyed it the first time, too. One of the other ones that I saw in person that I really liked is what's called the Wright Flyer. And the Wright Flyer has a little piece of canvas from the airplane itself in it. They do little things like that, and it has, the rotor has a prop across it. That I always thought was a very, very, very cool thing. Finally, the DH-88, which is the name of an airplane, the 1934 de Havilland Comet, is one of their newest watches, and that thing is really beautiful. All of these photographs of watches are ones that we took in the store. They brought out different ones for us to look at, and we had a wonderful time there. Anyhow, without further ado, I'd like to present Nick English and our interview with Bremont watches. So I wanted to know what Bremont's plans are to make it, because I know you seem to be heading in that direction to making totally in-house movements. And I just wanted to know about that. That to me is very exciting.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, to answer your first question, the pilot's bit, I think from our perspective, there is a pretty hefty DNA within the brand of aviation. We're sort of brought up in it, lived, breathed it. We still do a lot of flying, old and modern aircraft. I think there's similarity, and to be fair, it doesn't really matter if you're exposed to a beautifully engineered car, beautifully engineered clock, beautifully engineered watch. It's all about the engineering, and I think when you get into an old airplane, they're all massively over-engineered. Whether it's a 787 you're flying or a Harvard from 1942, they're all being designed to go through a lot more than you'll put them through. And I think that was a lot of our philosophy when we were building watches. So it's about producing a beautifully engineered timepiece that you could wear to a meeting like this or a conversation like this, but literally go and climb Everest or be a North Sea diver or military Royal Navy clearance diver, and that has always been one of the pillars of what we're about. When it comes to the design of aviation watches, obviously on a aesthetic viewpoint, clarity is really important. The whole idea of using a computer when you're flying is not going to happen, I'm afraid. Well, not if you're doing your job properly, because you should be looking at the cockpit a lot of the time. On the ground, I can understand, in the 50s when you've got the computer and you're working out the wind direction and drift and that sort of thing. I can imagine it being very, very useful. But for me, one of the key parts of a watch flying was the clarity. Stop and start. Stopwatch is very, very useful, especially if you're doing legs, and we're talking about IFO flying in the instrument conditions earlier on. Then you do need that. And then in terms of us, so that's sort of the pilot side, and because of that and our enthusiasm for the pilot watches, but also the military. The military's become quite a big part of Bremont's business, and it's something we're really, really proud of.
You're making watches for the RAF now?
Yeah, no, many squadrons. So, but US, UK, Europe, Asia, Australia's an interesting one as well. And I think a lot of that came from our work with the likes of Martin Baker over the years. The ejection seat pioneers. I work with Boeing, which is an interesting material technology. Yeah, ejection seat sitting right there. So, and that was an incredible partnership where you're dealing with guys who are proper aeronautical engineers, and you're designing a watch which can go through all their environmental testing facilities, which we don't have. No watch brand will have the ability to stick something through the shock, the vibration, the salt fog, all these amazing tests that we're allowed to put our watches through, and it led to the watches being adopted a little bit by the public, which is.
But your cases are
Yes.
so good. I mean, that's one thing that I do know about it. You have like some unusually good cases, which is sort of like somebody who's not quite as sedentary as I am now would, I'm banging around, bumping into stuff. It's those cases will take it. I got this little skinny Patek Philippe. They told me little Calatrava, and it bumps into stuff and it'll have a heart attack. So I would wear it. But those cases are substantial. Now you're working also with, what is it? Jaeger-LeCoultre, is that right?
Yes, we work with a number of different. So, at Bremont, we're absolutely passionate about trying to do as much as we can in the UK. So, if you look at, so we've got two facilities. One in Henley, where you'll see the watchmakers, and you'll see a lot of the operational team, the design team, the technical team there. But then also we've got a facility about an hour away in Silverstone, which is where you're literally going to see a bar of steel going in. Cases, watch parts, and other bits coming out of there, and they're then sent to Henley, where they're assembled. Now, there's always going to be a stage process for us as a brand. So, a number of years ago, we said, right, we're going to start making our own cases. And if you think about the percentage of watch brands making their own cases, very, 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 very few actually do.
I know. Yeah,
most are made
from
somewhere, and probably not in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And we wanted to say, no, actually, look, let's control that, and it allows us to do more on the R&D side, control supply. There's a number of reasons we did it, and they are hard cases. Our cases are all three-piece cases. You've got this way that sort of the lugs melt over the case a little bit, and they're not easy things to do. Majority of cases are two pieces. You've got the case and the case back, and we've got this extra layer which makes it, I think, prettier to look at. So if you look at one of our cases, you can see the middle.
Yeah.
But also you can see the way the lugs sort of sit on top,
Yeah,
and that's quite special from our perspective. But then the next step was saying, right, let's start doing some movement parts. So we started working with, we worked, as I said before, a number of different movement companies. But one example was Jaeger, and coming up with a movement which is unique to us, but also where we can start manufacturing some of those parts in the UK, so like the bridges and nameplates and things. And that was the first step. So this movement here, you can see, a chunk of this is done in the UK, which is very exciting. The next stage was, and this is 2 years ago, or about a year, just under 2 years ago, we started working with a chap called Stephen McDonald, who's an incredible movement designer who, for example, has just done NBNS, a perpetual calendar, just really.
Isn't the McDonald of McDonald Aircraft, is it?
No.
Okay.
Stephen worked in Switzerland for 13 years,
Oh.
but he's been working on this new movement. So we're, next year you should see some quite interesting stuff from us in terms of a movement which is.
Are you going to be entering watches into the Grand Prix, the Horology de Genève?
Possibly. I mean, what we are as a brand, we're not trying to produce watches which are winning prizes for complications, and what we're trying to do is produce a watch which could go in all of our, and produce a movement which would fit into the majority of our watches. So very, very usable, very robust. If you think of a briefly engineered Rolex movement, that's the sort of way we're thinking.
A lot of the watches that have actually won were not
agreed.
Marvels as far as that is what I was thinking. Two categories, okay. The thing that I keep getting, people want something, like what Harboring 2 did. They came out with a watch that was under $5,000, and they won all of these awards, and they made an incredibly good watch. And so I'm thinking, for a pilot's watch, is that like maybe a little one called the Mosquito or something like that?
A new movement. Well, this is it, and this new movement is going to have some patentable technology in it. There's some really exciting thing inside it, but the whole purpose for us is to produce it. So it's got to be beautifully engineered. It's got to be It's got to look beautiful. It's got to be very Bremont. It's got to be very British. It's also got to be very robust. So we're trying to produce a movement which isn't. If you make it too small, it becomes a little more likely to be susceptible to knocks and bangs and things. So we're trying to make it a fairly robust movement, which can then slot in, as I said, to most of the range. So, but no, possibly we might, and it'll certainly have the potential.
I tell you, there's certainly a market for that. The Petite Aiguille category that they have at the Grand Prix is for watches under 8,000 Swiss francs.
Yes.
It's about $8,000. And that's a Tudor put one in there and won. They won one with a ETA movement in a Tudor, and won what was called a Heritage. And then what Tudor turned around and did, they finally gave Tudor their own movement. I mean, in-house movement.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of an interesting thing. And I'm thinking, my God, they get the same thing over and over again. And I was thinking, just among other things, with the cases that you make are so interesting and so different and so good. And then if you had your own movement, is to find one of those categories.
It'll be, that's the holy grail for us. It's that final, when you do that, when we get to the stage and we can manufacture movements on, as I was saying before, if you're making 10 movements a year, it's quite special, but it's still you're prototyping pretty much.
Yeah.
Because if something doesn't quite work, you tweak it, and we've been through it ourselves. If you're trying to produce 5, 10, 20,000 of these things, they've got to be, anything we make in the UK has got to be as good as the Swiss, otherwise why would anyone buy it? So when you're producing a movement, it's on those sort of numbers, everything's got to just work first time, and that's harder to do. It just is, because everything's just got to fit. You can't have someone assembling the movement, suddenly polishing one bit and not doing another bit. It's just all got to go together beautifully. And that's the challenge, and that hasn't been done in the UK for many, many years.
Didn't Christopher Ward just come out with an in-house movement?
They have come up with their movement, but it's all done in Switzerland.
It's what?
It's all done in Switzerland. It's completely done in Switzerland.
Oh.
And it'll use existing, I think it uses existing drivetrains out there. And
yeah, but so yours is...
So ours will have a completely new drivetrain. It's a completely brand new movement. So there'll be no...
That's incredibly exciting, I think.
Well, no, it is. It is.
Yeah.
It's,
and especially with a pilot watch made by people who know about pilots. And the Bremont is, the great hope for the great English hope, I guess.
Well, that's very so. We are passionate about it. I think Giles and I also, the way we look at it is if in 20 years' time you can look back and you can say, actually, we had a part, no matter how big or small, in the resurgence of British watchmaking, that would be a really lovely thing to be involved with. So, but we're fairly pragmatic about it, and I think as you grow as a company, it allows you to invest more into, if you're producing 500 watches a year, it's hard to get the investment necessary to buy the equipment, to everything needed, the design time. It's very, very expensive. Whereas if you're building, a few thousand watches, you can see the end goal. You can say, actually, that movement there can fit into these particular watches we're making, and reinvest in machinery, and it's exciting because you have this sort of apprentice scheme where we sort of teach people how to watch technicians and other watchmakers, which again don't grow on trees in the UK. So it's a long term kind of project, really.
Oh, I think it's very exciting. Like I said, with a watch like that, is a lot of the people who visit my blog, it's learning the terms as they go along, is that they have Rolexes and Omegas, and that kind of watch, which is more of an active,
the more obvious
kind of person. Okay. And I try to say, well, get one for a date night, but these other ones are the favorites, and I think that pilot watches, especially ones that are robust, are something that are, because I mean, it's not like I said, it's not like my Patek that it's, I have to treat very gently and talk nicely.
Well, this is why a part of, as I said at the beginning, part of what we're about was producing a watch. So this is a watch which, I'd build our treehouse with, or I'd go and, I would genuinely, it's a really good, robust movement in it.
Well, I mean, you can see it. Treehouse with it.
No, but I was bashing around in the treehouse the other day. I mean, it's designed to be able to do that, and the case is all hardened. So we diffuse the cases with carbon at high temperature, and then we effectively
so that would be
a plate.
Yeah, I think stainless steel.
Well, no, I mean, especially the military ones, the Martin Bakers of this world, and the MB series we do, and there's a few watches that we've got in Basel next year, or Basel equivalent. The releases for next year are quite exciting as well. But it's part of that, and we're quite lucky that you do have a few of those sort of guys who are wearing the watches, which is lovely. So.
Well, anyway, I'm going to turn this off.
No.
If you want to find out more about Bremont, go to their website. That's what I did to find out more about them. Now, by the time we're on to our next talk next Friday, it will be right after the election. Not the one they're having in the U.S. This is an election where you vote for something you may really want, and that's the Grand Prix de Horologie de Genève. A lot of you have gotten to vote, and you did already. And they're coming out with the results Thursday evening. So in the U.S., it'll probably be late afternoon. And on Friday, I'll have all of the results of what the new winners are, the Grand Prix winners, and also who's going to the winner of our first watch. Plus, we're going to see what the next contest holds. Anyhow, we'll see you next Friday. Bill Sanders for WatchArtSci.
Tower Blue, 650 volt, if I'm 50, 27 left, for the land, 230 or 20. 7 left, Blue, 650. 29 right turn, ground 9. 707-270 heading south of 1516. We are do our best. 35 to our day, south 15. Giant 74 Tango Whiskey, 2.6 for 3,000, 140 on that. 623. Contact purchase. Find the price you like to 744. 227.4, yeah, 381.